One. Hey, I'm Clark,
And I'm Chris.
and we're here doing our devotional this week. This week, we get to do a really fun story in the middle of the Old Testament, and that is the story of Ruth. So,
Clark, what's one thing that stood out to you from this story?
it was a tough transition to your part from my part. One thing that stood out from this text is that the very first verse says that during the time of the judges. And so what I'm trying to say about this text is that it is a ray of sunshine in the darkness, because this is like a really fun, faithful story of Ruth, who's just this amazing, faithful woman. And it comes during the times of the Judges, which, if you read the book of Judges in the Old Testament, is probably the most depressing, violent, gross, disturbing book in the Old Testament. It's just this story of people
Read it.
living.
It's got cool, weird, disgusting scenes in it, and it's just weird literature. Read it. It's awesome.
Yeah, and it's awesome. And so it's I don't know if
And
awesome's I
it's
don't know if
the
awesome's the right
Bible.
word, but it is very dark. And this is what life is like without God. And then all of a sudden, it's like the story of God stops for a second, and we get to see that there still are people who are being faithful to God in dark times, and that there are still that God is still active in this time. And I think for us, that's especially something that we need reminded of right now, like COVID-19. We have racial injustice, Black lives just being destroyed just at any
We
moment.
have we
We,
have gunshots 2 blocks from
yes,
our house while we're outside grilling or
yes,
walking around the track as Gavin
yes.
was with Gus.
We have people yelling and arguing on TV all the time about anything and everything. And there's just a lot of darkness. And I think it's good to be reminded of the goodness that there still is when people are faithful to God. So, so Chris, darkness, hopelessness. What was Naomi going through in this section? What are you thinking of when you think of her hopelessness and maybe what we're feeling in our times now?
Yeah, so Naomi, it's pretty. Think about a single, a widow in a foreign land in the midst of it's not an epidemic, it's what's it called when there's no food stuff?
Famine. Yeah.
Famine, thank you,
Yeah.
that's the word. In the midst of a famine, economic crisis, they didn't have Social Security, they didn't have a safety net. She had nothing to support her. And and she talks in that passage about, God is against me, and bitterness, the deep bitterness that she is experiencing at the hand of God. And so this is a woman who is in a dark place.
Yeah.
And stories like this, read the book of Judges and all its weird darkness, and then read this book as a ray of sunshine in the midst of it. And it helps me, it helps me trust in the midst of the hopelessness that I'm tempted to experience now, to think, okay, God's still at work. I can't see it. You know, Ruth and Naomi didn't understand that a couple generations later, one of their great great grandchildren was going to be the king of King David. So they didn't see it in their lifetime. They didn't know it was coming, and so it gives me hope. I might not see it, but God's at work.
Yeah.
There is hope. There
Yeah.
is light.
And it's like Naomi keeps saying God's hand is against me. She's depressed, she's down, and she doesn't see that, yeah, God is at work through Ruth, who it says, I love the verse in 14, the word where it says Ruth clung to her. Naomi's saying, go back, go have your own life. You don't need to be a part of my troubles, about a part of my pain. Don't get involved with this mess. And Ruth clung to her with it, which in the Hebrew, that word literally means something like glue, like stick to someone. And it's the same word in Genesis 2 that we read like a month or so ago, where a man and a woman, a man will leave his mother and his father, and he will cling to his wife. They literally are. Ruth is becoming one with Naomi in terms of loyalty, affection. She is her life. She's being completely faithful to Naomi. So I think when people are going through it, when we're going through tough times, when people have, whether it's depression or just really hard circumstances, we're called to cling to them the way Ruth did. They are our family, especially God's people, especially the church. We are called to be there with one another in the hard times. So, Chris, how do you apply this to your life, this clinging?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot lately about who are we as a house church, and who are we at the bridge, and that whole clinging, sticking. We've decided, Angie and I moved here in 2008 and said we're going to be here at least 10 years, and at this point we're thinking, we want to cling to at-risk kids, people in this neighborhood, and as long as God allows that, that's who we are. Is we're sticking right where we are, and trying to make a difference in the lives of especially at-risk kids, but people in our neighborhood. And I think it makes a difference.
Amen.
People
Yeah, I
stick.
agree. I mean, you can see from this story, it made all the difference in Naomi's life. And especially if you read to the end, which you should this week, take 15, 20 minutes out of your time to read this whole story. But what really helps me, just to wrap this up, is to remember, not so like, yes, be like Ruth, and remember that we are like Naomi, that we are sinful, we are in need of help, we are in need of God's grace, um, and that we already have Jesus who's better than Ruth, right? Jesus has already entered into the world. He didn't have to. He could have stayed away. God could have stayed hands off, but he entered into our hopelessness. He entered into our sinfulness, and he chose to cling to us. He chose to cling to us, to sacrifice for us on the cross, to defeat Satan and death, all that so we could be united to God, also that we could have the joy brought back into our lives of being with God, so that in dark times we have hope because of Jesus. Not, I mean, yes, we should look at this as be like Ruth, and we should remind ourselves of there is no perfectly dark circumstances in our lives because Jesus has already shined light into our darkness.
Amen.
All right. So that's what we've got for you this week. We would both say, hey, take 15, 20 minutes out of your day, read through the whole book of Ruth. It's a great, great story to read. So hope you do that before Sunday, and we'll see you all on Sunday at church.
Bye, guys. Love you.
Love you.